Hey everyone, welcome back to Brian's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail. Today's case is somewhat different. We are going to be talking about a disappearance. However, it is a disappearance of a fugitive that has now been wanted for over 20 years. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with this case. This case happened all the way back when I was still in college. It has been going on for almost 22 years. People think that he might still be alive. We're going to talk about all the details. We're going to be discussing Robert William Fisher, who was born on April 13th of 1961. He was, at the time of this incident, living in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is on the outside of Phoenix, located here in that red area. It is a very beautiful town. It is considered a very safe town. At the time, it was considered one of the safest places to live in Arizona, until that dreadful morning on April 10th of 2001, which is now infamous. I'm going to go over basically his history, then go into the details of what happened, also some other details throughout the years of the investigation and things that stymied the investigation and where it lies today. Now, this is various pictures of what Fisher looked like at the time, how he might have changed his appearance. It's now been, of course, over 20 years. They have been doing age progressive photographs. This is what he could possibly look like. He's now in his 60s. That is, if he's still alive. His early life was, like I said, spent in New York City. Then he was living in Tucson, Arizona with his family. At some point in his teenage years, his parents got divorced. According to everyone that knew him, including his family, this had a huge impact on Fisher's life. Even into the time of this terrible tragedy, he was always talking about it, this divorce, how it affected him so greatly, almost sort of blaming it in a way. And we're going to talk about more of that as we get into the video, but just keep that in mind. After he graduated from high school in Tucson, he went to enlist in the U.S. Navy, which apparently for him went well. Again, he was still always discussing his parents' divorce and how it just really destroyed his life. Although he had siblings, and they said that they dealt with it differently, and obviously everyone deals with things differently. During his time in the Navy, he did at one point try and go out for the Navy SEALs. However, this did not work out for him, which is not really a big thing. I mean, the Navy SEALs is an elite program. I can't remember the percentages, but a very small percentage of people that do go out for it don't make it. However, his whole life, he was a very accomplished outdoorsman, or at least in his mind he was. He was a hunter, a fisherman. He eventually joined the fire department in California, where he worked for a while until a back injury forced him to stop. Did odd jobs. He worked as a weed sprayer on a farm for a little while. His bosses said that he was a good worker, except he was always in this constant back pain. In the late 80s, in 1987 to be exact, he met and married Mary Cooper. They seemingly had a good relationship. It was going well. They moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. The family from the outside seemed like a normal family. They eventually had 2 children. They had a black lab. They were living in the 2200 block of 74th Place in Scottsdale, Arizona. Their neighbors said that they were church-going people. This is the Baptist church that apparently they were highly involved with. However, over time, things started appearing in the marriage. People started noticing different things. Mary got a job, and when friends asked her, she said that it was a quote-unquote security fund. Robert Fisher got a job at the Scottsdale campus of the Mayo Clinic, working as a respiratory therapist and a catheter technician. According to his colleagues, he was a good worker. However, even then, they reported that he would often discuss his marriage, citing various problems due to his own parents. And quote, at one time he said that if Jan hadn't left my father, Jan was his mother's name, my life would be so much better. This even spilled into his hunting and fishing life. He would often talk of this to his hunting buddies. He also started displaying some disturbing behavior there. At one point, they had gotten an elk and they were getting ready to prepare it, and he went about putting the blood on his face, doing just very odd things. At one point, they were on a camping trip and he snuck up behind some unsuspecting campers that he didn't even know and just fired his gun into the air multiple times to scare them. And according to witnesses, he was just smiling and laughing. More cracks developed in the marriage and were showing to people in their circle of friends. Mary would tell friends that he was extremely controlling. Even Robert's mother said that his father was the same way. Robert was said to be very cold and controlling, even with his children. They said that he loved his black Labrador Retriever, his dog, more than he did his family. At least he showed the dog affection. In some of the home videos that I saw, just the way he spoke to his family, it's just very, very cold and odd. He's just a weird guy, in my opinion, even if I hadn't known about what we do now. His first run-in with the law was in 1997 when he was having problems with a stray pit bull that apparently belonged to a neighbor. He said that the dog kept coming onto his property, trying to attack his dog. He eventually shot the pit bull one day when it came onto his property. Of course, the police were called. The police contend that Robert purposely tried to get the dog onto his property. He said that he had a vendetta against the dog. Robert claimed otherwise. We'll never know, really. Ultimately, the fighting between Robert and Mary just got out of control. They even sought counseling from their pastor at their church. Nothing seemed to help. Robert wouldn't let anything be put up on the walls except for things that he would want. Like, she got once a tapestry from a relative. She wasn't allowed to put it up, and he was constantly just nagging her about certain things. However, ironically, the neighbors that were living in there at the time said that these yelling matches, they could always hear her screaming, but they never actually heard him yelling. This could be in part that people felt like he was always trying to put up this facade that he was this gentle, loving family man, which, as we know, he really wasn't. He had confided in his coworkers that the marriage was not working, but he said, quote, "Divorce is not an option." Mary had told friends that she was going to divorce Robert in the coming weeks. On April 9, 2001, the neighbors reported hearing another massive fight coming from the Fisher household, roughly 10:30 p.m. in the evening. The next morning at roughly 8:42 a.m., April 10th, 2001, the neighborhood was shocked and rattled by a huge explosion. Immediately, the 911 calls started flooding in. Every neighbor within a couple of houses away started calling 911 to the point where the operators told them, "Are you calling about the fire? We've already got everybody on the way." In the meantime, before the fire department got there, the neighbors tried in vain to try and use their garden hoses to put out or to help stop the spread of this fire, but that's like shooting a BB gun at a freight train. As you can see, this explosion was so big that it blew out the brick wall of their house. It was just insane. Fully involved is what they call it. The flames were over 20 feet high, and the firefighters were just trying to contain it from spreading to the other houses because these houses were very close to one another. As they battled the fire, they had no idea what they were dealing with, whether there were people inside. They finally got it under control and got the fire out. That was when they started their preliminary investigation. One of the Fisher family vehicles, Mary's 4Runner, was missing, so the hope was that they were all gone and they didn't even know that this had happened. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. As you can see, the explosion even blew out Robert's truck that he had parked right in front of the house. They started sifting through all the rubble. They brought in the forensics team, and unfortunately, very quickly, they realized that there were 3 deceased human beings in there. Of course, they thought they probably died in the fire. However, after further examination, they found out this was not the case. They also discovered, this is a picture of the hose leading into the furnace. It had been deliberately pulled out. There was a candle that had been set on the floor, and next to the candle, a bunch of accelerants like gasoline had been laid out. This was done on purpose. Someone had staged this, whether to cover up evidence, whether to buy themselves more time. They weren't certain of anything at this point. However, after speaking to the medical examiner, they discovered even more terrible things. They discovered that it was Robert's family, his 2 children and his wife, that they had found. They determined that they had been killed before the fire had even started. I'm not going to go into how. I'll have more information in the description if you want to do more reading, but they were murdered before this fire explosion was set. Allegedly, and I say that because Robert Fisher, still to this date, has not been found. As you will probably surmise as well, he is the main suspect, the only person of interest ever listed in this case. One thing that did survive the fire was his gun safe, which had a bunch of weapons in it. His handgun was missing. However, there was a bunch of home movies as well as other things in the safe. They caught him on surveillance tape at an ATM machine that evening at around 10:40 p.m. He took out the daily maximum, $280. He's wearing an Oakland Raiders cap. You can see the white 4Runner in the back, which is Mary's vehicle. Most authorities and investigators on this case believe that this took place after the crime. This sparked nationwide manhunt. Once they started putting it together, it was a few days before they even listed him as a suspect or a person of interest. However, after all these things started coming together, they realized that he most likely had some kind of involvement, or he was the guilty party. Nothing seemed to add up in this case. Why, if he was innocent, why didn't he come home? If he had just been out like blowing off steam or something, and this arbitrarily happened by someone else, which is just such a far stretch of any imagination. There was also the fact that all of his clothes had been removed from the house. Why would he take all of his clothes, take out all that money? It just showed that he was attempting to flee. Ultimately, Robert William Fisher was charged with 3 counts of felony murder, 1 count of felony arson, and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. There were pictures and posters of him up everywhere. He's a white male. He's roughly 6 feet tall. At the time, he was at about 180 pounds. If he's still alive, who knows what his weight is today. He's got a surgical scar on his lower back and a gold upper bicuspid tooth he could have removed. We don't know. The weeks following, everybody, the residents, the authorities, everybody was looking for Robert William Fisher. They wanted to know what the heck happened. Why did he do this? Why didn't he come home if he was innocent? Which, again, I don't personally believe. The only other real major clue that we have is that on April 20th, 2001, his wife's vehicle, the white Toyota 4Runner, the vehicle that Fisher was believed to be driving, was found roughly 100 miles north in the Tonto National Forest, where that top red X star is. There was no sign of Fisher. His dog Blue was there. It was abandoned. He had made a nest under the car, was basically just waiting for help. Inside the vehicle, there was nothing but the Oakland Raiders cap that we saw in the ATM footage and a coffee cup that had one of his fingerprints on it. The car was immaculate, which to me is very bizarre. This was a car that his wife used to take their children to work, to church. There was no other fingerprints, no fibers, nothing. They did find human waste next to the passenger side of the vehicle. They found some footprints leading away. Of course, they started a massive investigation in and around the area, but unfortunately, there's a network of caves, which from my investigation, they only searched 2, and there's over a dozen. It is noteworthy to say that over the last 20 years, numerous expert cave explorers, professionals that have all kinds of equipment, have searched the various networks of caves. Over the years, they found absolutely nothing. So if he had committed suicide, you'd think they'd find something, or at least the weapon. Unfortunately, with all those efforts, nothing over the years, not one trace has ever been found. Getting back to the original investigation, foul weather, snow moved into the area. The investigation was halted and eventually suspended, and really they only searched within about a mile of where they found that vehicle. They did find footsteps leading into or towards the Fort Apache reservation. However, that was never searched. To me and other people that have followed or investigating this case, it is quite plausible that he made it onto that reservation, either had assistance or was able to find a ride off the reservation, and that's how he got away, because he did have quite a head start on them. After not finding Fisher in that area after they found Mary's car was extremely disappointing. They thought for sure that would lead to his arrest. More and more time just kept going by. Eventually got the FBI involved, and in June of 2002, Robert William Fisher was added to the FBI's Most 10 Wanted list, where he remained for almost 20 years. He was the 475th person to be added to the list. The authorities felt that the publicity of being on the 10 Most Wanted list would help bring him to capture. He was even featured on America's Most Wanted, The Hunt with John Walsh. There's been several documentaries and films, all kinds of things made about this tragedy and following the fugitive Robert William Fisher. I'll have links in the description if you want to do further reading or research. I went through from 2001 all the way to the current date, all the archives, pulled out the 3 most poignant ones, and I'll discuss as far as when there was a thought to be sighting. The first occurred in 2009 down in Guatemala. There was a couple of tourists. They were taking photographs. This Caucasian male approached them. He was very aggressive, angry, asking them to take the camera, to delete any pictures that he might have been in the background. He caused the scene. The police eventually got involved because he was being so aggressive and adamant that they destroy these pictures. It all seemed very bizarre. He did match some tendencies of Robert William Fisher. The FBI has not released any photos or any other information on that because this is still an ongoing investigation. The second and probably most infamous possible sighting was the arrest of a man up in White Rock, the Vancouver area of Canada. They actually arrested this guy. They brought him in, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is a picture of both of them together. Personally, when I looked at this, they don't really look that much alike, but he had the same tooth that was missing. He had the same scar, both at the time, same exact age, weight, height. Ultimately, the RCMP contacted the American authorities. The American authorities fingerprinted this man that they were holding in custody up in Vancouver. The fingerprints were not a match to Fisher's. However, the authorities had also brought up various witnesses and neighbors of Fisher's that knew him very well, and they were just adamant that this guy was Robert William Fisher. Even after the fingerprints proved he wasn't, this poor guy's mother had to come down and show his birth certificate and photographs and all these other things. So they finally were able to eliminate him as a suspect. But even before that, some of our newspapers were printing that they had caught him up in Canada. I'll show you one of those articles right here. After this guy was cleared, in some of the documentaries, some of his neighbors that lived near him in Scottsdale or former colleagues still attest to this day that that was Robert Fisher, that he somehow had his fingerprints altered, which to me is a ridiculous theory, but everyone's entitled to their opinion. For years before they caught the Utah cabin burglar, the guy that was going around ransacking cabins in southern Utah in the mid to late 2000s, early 2000s, until they identified him as another guy, Troy James Knapp. For a year or two, many people believed that this could be Robert William Fisher, as he was known to be a mountain man and wanted to live out in the wild. Again, it was just a false lead that led nowhere. The other big tip that led to something that they thought was Robert William Fisher was in Commerce City in Colorado. It's a suburb of Denver. This was in October of 2014. They really thought that it was a good lead, so the police moved in. Of course, it wasn't Robert Fisher. However, in this case, it did lead to the arrest of 2 other criminals that the police had been looking for. So at least this had some positive outcome. Unfortunately, Robert William Fisher remains missing to this day, and there to date have been no confirmed actual sightings of him. There are several possible theories in this case. One is that after he committed the 3 homicides, he went up to the Tonto National Forest where the vehicle was found he committed suicide, possibly in one of the caves, and his remains just haven't been found. The investigators and most people working this case over the years, they believe that not to be the case. They say that his personality, the profilers have all said he was too arrogant, too full of himself to do something like that. They believe he took all his clothes, he made a plan, he had some help, he got out of the car in the Tonto National Forest. They believe that because the dog was still there, that there was another vehicle there to assist him get out of the forest. They believe had there not been another vehicle, the dog would have consistently tried to follow Fisher had he tried to make his escape on foot. Again, these are just theories. Some people don't even understand why he brought the dog with him. If he was planning on camping, the dog would have easily given him away. There's just so many unknowns in this case. The people of Scottsdale have slowly healed over the years, but the people that are still there that remember this, and most people, it's just left a huge scar on their town. They want to know what actually happened to Mr. Fisher. Some people think that he's still alive and started a new family as in some other state or south of the border. Some people think that might have been the case, but he has since passed away and we just don't know because he was using an alias. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this case. Like I said in the beginning, if you have thoughts or theories, I'd love to hear about them. There had been a lot of people that asked me to cover this case since I started my channel. I had actually known about it for a while. I wanted to cover it. I just wanted to go through all the information and get the most pertinent things available and give you guys a synopsis of it and my thoughts on it. He was just recently, about a year ago, removed from the top 10 most wanted list with the FBI. However, he is still on their radar. They are still investigating this. This is still an open investigation with the Scottsdale Police Department. Personally, I believe it has been so long, it's going to be hard to find him because of the aging process. Who knows, though, if he is even still alive. He's most likely tried to alter his appearance, probably taken out that gold upper bicuspid tooth. He probably still walks with the erect manner that he normally walks with because of his back surgery. He would still have the scar. Who knows? I would definitely like to hear your thoughts on this case. I'll have more information in the description, links to various other documentaries. If you have Prime or anything like that, you can check out some other documentaries, research that kind of thing. Thank you all for watching. As always, you all are just absolutely wonderful. I hope you're all having a wonderful summer so far. Happy summer solstice. Thank you, co.ag, for providing the background music. Hopefully I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me till the end. I really appreciate all your support and feedback and comments. I love hearing from you all. I'm going to be doing the coin giveaway drawing announcement. I'm going to do that in the next video. I was going to do it this video, but I haven't had the time to go through all the entries yet, but I'll be doing that. If you have any case suggestions or calendar submissions for next year's calendar pictures, I'll have the email address in the description as always. If you can and would like to help support the channel, I would really appreciate it, going through these rough times, but my Lyme's is improving a little bit. I'm off the antibiotics. Obviously you can't be on antibiotics forever. Now they're just trying to treat the various symptoms, but unfortunately chronic Lyme's is still sort of not very well understood, is the way I understand it in the medical community and what they have told me. So it can be frustrating, but I really appreciate all your support, your feedback, your comments. All my information is in the description. If you do want to leave a donation, I have my Venmo, PayPal, all that stuff in the description. But even just leaving a comment or liking the video, that's enough for me. I just appreciate all your feedback and support. This case, even though it's so old, decades old, it still gets hundreds of tips daily, if not over the years. I read they just get thousands of tips over the years. There's been so many assumed sightings, but never a confirmed sighting. It's one of those things. He doesn't have a face that really stands out, so who knows if we'll ever know the real answer to what happened. My thoughts and prayers go out to Mary and her 2 children that were taken from this earth way too soon, her family, everybody that knew and loved them, all the FBI agents and Scottsdale police, all the investigators that are working so hard to bring this case to closure. My thoughts and prayers go out to you and everybody else who has helped and aided with this investigation, trying to find closure for those family members that are still living. Alright guys, see you next time.